Now, mass protests are expected in Venezuela today for what opposition leader Juan Guaido says will be the largest march in the country's history. It comes a day after violent clashes sparked by Guaido's call for the military to overthrow President Maduro. Well, today's turnout will be a key test for Guaido and his bid to gain the support of the armed forces. President Maduro has denounced the opposition moves and says he retains the loyalty of the military. Right, joining me now from the Venezuelan capital, Caracas, is journalist Philip Crowther. Thanks for talking to us here on Euronews now. Of course, as we've been saying, Juan Guaido has called for these mass demonstrations. It's morning where you are right now. Are there any signs, though, that people are responding to his appeal?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a big day of protests here in Venezuela. Still quiet here early in the morning, local time, but things will change because this is a crucial day for the opposition leader, Juan Guaido, because if he is calling for the biggest protests in the history of Venezuela, specifically the day after it would appear he tried to get the military definitively on his side and didn't manage to do so, well, he'll have to really come up with a show of force here in Caracas and indeed in other cities across Venezuela this Wednesday on May Day. We saw him yesterday with just a few dozen members of the military by his side, and during the day that didn't really change. It would appear that the military sided largely with the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro. That is why he, relatively late in the evening, came on state television and said that his government had beaten this coup d'etat attempt in Venezuela. So essentially what the opposition leader and the self-proclaimed interim president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, wants to see here today, this Wednesday in Caracas, are first of all mass demonstrations, and then if they are big enough, well, that might motivate other members of the military, more soldiers, to side with him. By the way, the opposition won't be the only ones in the streets of Caracas today, because the Venezuelan president Maduro has also called on his supporters to take to the streets. In other words, the potential for clashes may be similar, maybe similarly violent to the ones we saw yesterday here in the Venezuelan capital. Well, that potential is pretty big here today.
Well, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has waded in. He's said just only in the last few minutes that Washington is prepared to take military action. Is this making matters worse? Is that really a realistic option?
No, it doesn't seem to be a realistic option. Certainly a military intervention from the United States just doesn't seem realistic. It is simply too difficult to organize, and it doesn't have widespread political support around the world. It might, though, happen that the United States does get out of this what they want, because they got so awfully close yesterday. Remember that according to the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the President Nicolas Maduro was seriously envisaging, though he has denied this, that he might want to flee to Cuba, and was seriously envisaging going to the airport and getting out of the country. That is exactly what the opposition wants to see happen here. That's exactly what the United States wanted to provoke. They didn't get what they wanted in the end. According to the Secretary of State of the United States, that is because the Russians intervened and convinced Nicolas Maduro to not flee Caracas. That is why the Secretary of State Pompeo might very well today want to reach out to the Russians to come to some kind of an agreement. But when you look at what happened yesterday here in the streets of Caracas, that will give Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, motivation. He thinks he was victorious yesterday, so why should he leave at this point? That is most likely the way he sees things right now. Things are looking difficult for the opposition to really make that change, to come up with that real reversal here in Venezuela.